There's a sound that Marcus Webb can't forget. It's been 34 years, and he still hears it. In his dreams, in quiet moments. When he's near the ocean, a melody that shouldn't exist. A chorus of voices singing from a place where no human voice should ever be heard. 400 feet below the surface of the North Atlantic, in darkness so complete that your mind starts inventing things just to fill the void. Except, what Marcus heard wasn't his imagination. His dive partner heard it too. And what they saw down there, standing on the ocean floor in neat, impossible rows, that changed everything. This is a story about the deep. About the places we're not meant to go. About the things that wait for us in the darkness. And about a song that never ends. Let me take you back to November 1989. Let me tell you about a dive that should have been routine. Let me tell you about the day Marcus Webb stopped believing the ocean was empty. Marcus Webb didn't grow up near the ocean. He was born in Ohio. Landlocked. Flat farmland as far as you could see. His father worked at a tire factory. His mother was a schoolteacher. They had a small house on the edge of town with a yard just big enough for a vegetable garden and a rusted swing set. Normal, quiet, safe. Marcus joined the Navy when he was 19. Not because he loved the sea. Not because he dreamed of adventure. But because he needed to get out. Needed to see something beyond those flat fields and gray November skies. The recruiter told him about travel. About seeing the world, about learning skills that would serve him for life. Marcus signed the papers the same day. Boot camp was hell. He almost quit twice, but something kept him going. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the fear of going back home and admitting he couldn't hack it. Whatever it was, Marcus made it through, and somewhere during those brutal weeks of training, something changed in him. He found he was good at this, good at following orders, good at staying calm under pressure, good at pushing through when everything in his body screamed to stop. After boot camp, Marcus volunteered for dive training. He'd never been diving before. Never even been in water deeper than the community pool back home. But he'd heard the dive teams got better pay, got more respect. And there was something appealing about the idea of going places most people couldn't go. Of seeing things most people would never see. Dive training made boot camp look easy. The physical conditioning was brutal. The classroom work was intense. But the worst part was the pool. They'd hold you underwater until your lungs burned, until every instinct in your body screamed to surface, until you were absolutely certain you were going to drown. And then they'd hold you a little longer, teaching you to control the panic, teaching you to trust your equipment, teaching you that fear is just noise, and you can learn to ignore noise. Marcus was good at ignoring noise. He graduated third in his class, got assigned to a salvage and recovery unit out of Norfolk, Virginia, spent the next 7 years diving on shipwrecks, recovering equipment, doing underwater repairs on vessels that couldn't make it to dry dock. It was hard work, dangerous work. He saw things that gave him nightmares. Bodies trapped in sunken ships, mangled metal that could slice through a dive suit like paper, sharks circling in the murky water, curious about these strange bubbling intruders. But Marcus loved it. Loved the silence underwater. Loved the feeling of weightlessness. Loved being in a world where all the noise of the surface just disappeared. Down there, it was just you and the water and the task at hand. Simple, pure, honest. By the time Marcus was 32, he'd done over 800 dives. He'd been down to 600 feet. He'd worked in waters so cold that his regulator froze. He'd completed night dives where the darkness was so absolute that you couldn't see your own hand in front of your face. He'd done it all, seen it all, or so he thought. In October 1989, Marcus got new orders. Temporary assignment to the USS Intrepid, a research vessel conducting sonar mapping operations in the North Atlantic. 3 weeks. Routine deployment, easy money. Marcus packed his gear and kissed his wife goodbye. His daughter, Emily, was 4 years old. She cried when he left. She always did. Marcus promised her he'd bring back something special. A seashell, maybe. Or a piece of coral, something to add to her collection. He kept their picture in a waterproof pouch inside his dive suit. Sarah and Emily, smiling at the camera in their backyard. Sunshine. Green grass. Everything warm and safe, and far away from the cold darkness of the ocean. Marcus looked at that picture before every dive. His good luck charm, his reminder of what waited for him on the surface. The Intrepid wasn't like the ships Marcus was used to. It was smaller. Quieter. The crew was a mix of Navy personnel and civilian scientists. Oceanographers. Marine biologists. Geologists. People who studied the ocean the way Marcus worked in it. They spoke a language he didn't quite understand, talked about tectonic plates and thermal vents, and deep scattering layers. Marcus nodded politely and focused on his job. Maintain the diving equipment. Perform underwater retrievals. Stay ready for whatever they needed. His dive partner was a kid named David Chen, 26 years old, brilliant with electronics. Could fix a broken sonar array with a paperclip and some wire. But he was nervous underwater. You could see it in the way he breathed. Fast, shallow, wasting air. Marcus had been working with him for about 3 months, trying to teach him to relax, to trust the equipment, to understand that the ocean would kill you if you panicked, but it would hold you if you stayed calm. Chen was getting better. Slowly. But Marcus could tell he didn't love diving the way Marcus did. For Chen, it was just a means to an end. A way to get to the equipment he needed to repair. For Marcus, being underwater was like coming home to a place he'd never been. The Intrepid had been at sea for 11 days when it happened. 11 days of rough weather. Gray skies. Waves that made the ship roll and pitch like a toy in a bathtub. Half the crew was seasick. The other half pretended they weren't. They'd deployed a network of sonar equipment across the Erminger Basin, a deep water region between Iceland and Greenland. Unmapped territory, the kind of place where the ocean floor drops away into trenches so deep that no sunlight has ever reached the bottom. Marcus had studied the charts. The area they were working was deep, really deep. Some spots measured over 3,000 feet from surface to floor. But their equipment was deployed at more manageable depths, 400 feet. 500 feet, deep enough to be dangerous, not so deep that it was suicidal. On the morning of November 17th, Marcus woke to the sound of his alarm and the feeling of the ship rocking beneath him. The storm hadn't let up. If anything, it had gotten worse. 40-foot swells, wind that howled through the ship's superstructure like something alive. Marcus lay in his bunk for a moment, listening, wondering if they'd cancel the dive. Hoping they wouldn't. Breakfast was quiet. Most of the crew was too seasick to eat. Marcus forced down oatmeal and black coffee. Chen sat across from him, looking green. Not eating. Just staring at his tray. "You okay?" Marcus asked. Chen nodded. Didn't speak. Didn't look up. "We can postpone if you need to," Marcus said. "Weather's bad. Captain might call it off anyway." Chen shook his head. "I'm fine. Just didn't sleep well." Marcus studied him. Chen had dark circles under his eyes. His hands were shaking slightly. But his voice was steady. And Marcus needed to trust his dive partner. That's how it worked. You trusted each other or you didn't dive. "Okay," Marcus said. "But you tell me if something's wrong. Down there, I need to know you're good." Chen finally looked up. Met Marcus's eyes. "I'm good. I promise." The dive briefing was at 1300 hours. 1 o'clock. The captain stood at the front of the small ready room, pointing to a map of the ocean floor. Their target was a sonar array that had stopped transmitting 2 days earlier. Probably just a loose connection. Probably nothing serious. But they needed it back online, and the only way to do that was to send divers down to either fix it or retrieve it. 420 feet, the captain said. "Visibility is going to be poor. Current is strong. You'll have 40 minutes on the bottom. No more. Understand?" Marcus nodded. Chen nodded. 40 minutes was tight, but doable. Weather's not ideal. the captain continued. But we're on schedule, and I'd like to stay on schedule. If conditions worsen, we'll abort. But as of right now, the dive is a go. They geared up in the equipment room. Marcus moved through the familiar ritual. Wetsuit, weight belt, buoyancy compensator, tanks, regulator, mask. Each piece checked. Double-checked, triple-checked. Chen did the same, moving more slowly, more carefully. Still nervous, but thorough. At 13:55, 5 minutes before the scheduled dive time, they made their way to the dive platform at the stern of the ship. The ocean was angry. Dark gray water churned with white caps. Spray flew across the deck. The ship rose and fell with each swell. Marcus felt the familiar pre-dive calm settle over him, the noise of the surface world fading. The focus narrowing to just the task ahead. Chen stood beside him, regulator in his mouth, breathing hard. Marcus caught his eye, gave him the okay sign. Chen returned it. His hand was steady. At 1400 hours, they entered the water. The ocean swallowed them immediately. The noise of the storm disappeared, replaced by the sound of bubbles and breathing. Marcus felt the familiar shift, the transition from the world of air to the world of water. He loved this moment, the moment when gravity released its hold and you became something else, something that belonged down here. They began their descent. Following the anchor line, the light changed quickly. Blue near the surface, then green, then gray, then black. Marcus switched on his light, a narrow beam cutting through the murk. He could see Chen about 10 feet away, could see his bubbles rising, could see the gauge on his wrist glowing faintly. At 100 feet, Chen's voice crackled through the underwater comm system. "Visibility's worse than I thought." Marcus agreed. They could barely see 20 feet. The storm had churned up sediment, turned the water into a thick soup. But that was okay. They had lights. They had the anchor line. They had each other. At 200 feet, the pressure was building. Marcus equalized constantly, popping his ears, clearing his sinuses, the familiar ache in his joints, the weight of the water pressing down from above. This was the part where some divers panicked. Where the reality of how deep you were, how much water was above you, how far you were from air and light and safety, where all of that became too much. But Marcus had been here hundreds of times. This was home. At 300 feet, something changed. Marcus felt it before he could identify it. A shift in the water. A change in pressure that wasn't related to depth. Like the ocean itself had taken a breath, he slowed his descent, hovered in place, listening. Chen's voice came through the comm. "You feel that?" "Yeah," Marcus said. "Yeah, I feel it." "What is it?" "I don't know." They waited, suspended in darkness. The only sound was their breathing, the hum of their equipment, the distant groan of the ship's hull somewhere far above. But there was something else, something underneath all of that. A vibration, too low to hear. But there. Marcus could feel it in his chest, in his bones. "Should we go back up?" Chen asked. His voice was tight, controlled. But Marcus could hear the fear underneath. "No," Marcus said. "We're okay. Probably just current. Or the ship's engines. Sound travels weird down here." But even as he said it, Marcus didn't quite believe it. Because this didn't feel like current. Didn't feel like machinery. It felt like something else. Something alive. They continued descending. 325 feet, 350. The vibration grew stronger, more rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Marcus tried to shake off the unease creeping up his spine, tried to focus on the mission, on the task, on the training. At 375 feet, Chen's light beam suddenly swung to the left. Wild. Panicked. "Marcus," he said. His voice was higher now, strained. "Are you hearing this?" And that's when Marcus heard it. Clear this time. Unmistakable. Not a vibration, not machinery, but a sound, a tone, high-pitched, musical, rising and falling in a pattern that was almost familiar, like a song he'd heard before but couldn't quite place. Marcus stopped moving, stopped breathing for a second, just listening. The sound came again, longer this time. And now Marcus could hear that it wasn't just one tone. It was multiple tones, harmonizing, layered over each other, like a choir, like singing. "What the hell is that?" Chen's voice was barely controlled now. On the edge of panic, Marcus forced himself to think, to analyze. Sound underwater was tricky. It bounced off temperature layers, off the ocean floor, off schools of fish. It could be anything. Whales, though they were too deep for most whale species. Could be the ship, though they were too far away. Could be some kind of acoustic phenomenon. Some natural occurrence that science could explain, if he just knew the right words. But it didn't sound natural. It sounded human. It sounded like people singing, like a chorus of voices raised in some ancient hymn. Mournful, beautiful, terrifying. "It's probably just acoustics," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Sound behaves weird at depth. Could be coming from miles away. Could be..." He stopped, because the singing was getting louder. Not gradually, but suddenly, like whoever was singing had just moved much closer. And now, Marcus could hear individual voices, could hear the melody, could almost make out words. Chen was breathing hard now. Marcus could hear it through the comm. Fast, panicked, wasting air. "Chen, I need you to stay calm," Marcus said. "Control your breathing. We're okay. We're..." And then Chen screamed, not through the comm, a real scream. Muffled by his regulator but unmistakable. Marcus whipped around in time to see Chen's light beam spiraling downward. See his body dropping. Not swimming, not descending, falling. Marcus didn't think. He just reacted. Kicked hard. Dove after Chen. Grabbed his harness. Held on. Chen was thrashing now. Fighting. His eyes were wide behind his mask. Wild. Terrified. He was pointing down. Down into the darkness below them. Down where their light beams disappeared into infinite black. Marcus looked. And for just a moment, just one heartbeat, he saw them, figures, pale, human-shaped. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Standing on the ocean floor that should have been another 50 feet down. Standing in neat rows. Like soldiers at attention, like a congregation in church. And they were looking up, looking at Marcus and Chen. And they were singing. Their mouths were open. Their arms were at their sides. They didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't blink. Just stood there, singing that mournful, ancient song. And their eyes, God, their eyes, empty, white, like the eyes of fish that lived in eternal darkness. Like the eyes of things that had never seen the sun. Marcus felt something inside him break. Some fundamental assumption about the world. About what was possible. About what was real. Because this wasn't real. Couldn't be real. There were no people down here. No one could survive at this depth without equipment. Without light. Without air. This was impossible, but he was seeing it. And Chen was seeing it. And the singing was so loud now it was drowning out everything else. Filling Marcus's head. Filling his chest. Like the song was trying to get inside him, trying to pull him down. Down to join those rows of pale, impossible figures. Marcus made a decision. He didn't think about it. Didn't weigh options. Didn't consider protocol or mission parameters, or what the captain would say. He just grabbed Chen harder. And kicked. Up. Toward the light. Toward the surface. Toward air and life and sanity. Chen wasn't helping. wasn't swimming. He was dead weight in Marcus's grip. But Marcus had trained for this, had practiced emergency ascents, had done it in exercises and drills and simulations. Except, this wasn't a simulation. This was real. And the voices were following them, rising up through the water like they were chasing, like they didn't want Marcus and Chen to leave. Marcus kicked harder, ignored the burning in his legs, ignored the alarm on his dive computer screaming that he was ascending too fast, ignored everything except the need to get away, to get out, to get back to the world where things made sense. The voices grew louder, more urgent, and now Marcus could hear the words, could understand them, except they weren't in English. Weren't in any language he recognized, but somehow he knew what they meant, knew what they were saying. Stay, join us, sing with us, forever. 300 feet, 250. The water was getting lighter. The pressure was easing. But Marcus's lungs were burning. His dive computer was flashing red, warning him about decompression sickness, about nitrogen building up in his blood, about the risk of paralysis, of death. But he didn't care. He just kept swimming, kept pulling Chen, kept moving toward the light. 200 feet. 150. The voices were fading now, growing distant. Or maybe Marcus's ears were too damaged to hear them anymore. Maybe he'd ruptured an eardrum in the rapid ascent. Maybe his brain was shutting down. Maybe he was dying. But he kept swimming. At 100 feet, Chen started moving again, started helping. His kicks were weak, uncoordinated, but he was swimming. That was something. That was progress. 50 feet. 25. And then, suddenly, they broke the surface, exploded out of the water into wind and rain and blessed, beautiful air. Marcus ripped out his regulator and gasped, huge, desperate breaths. His vision was blurry. His ears were ringing. But he was alive. They were alive. The ship's horn was blaring. The dive safety team was shouting. Someone threw a line. Marcus grabbed it with numb fingers, held on. Let them pull him and Chen toward the platform. Let them haul them out of the water like fish, like drowned men brought back to life. Marcus collapsed on the deck. Chen collapsed beside him. Both of them shaking. Both of them breathing. Both of them alive. Someone was taking off Marcus's tanks. Someone else was checking his vitals. Voices all around, concerned, urgent, but distant. Like they were underwater. Like Marcus was still down there. What happened? Someone was asking. What went wrong? Marcus tried to answer. Tried to form words. But nothing came out. Just a sound. A sob. Or a laugh. He didn't know which. Chen was crying. Marcus could hear him. Could hear the broken sounds of a man who'd seen something that shouldn't exist. Who'd looked into the darkness and seen it looking back. Get them to medical, someone said. Now. Marcus felt hands lifting him, carrying him. He closed his eyes, but he could still see them. Those pale figures, standing in rows, looking up, singing their eternal song. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that he'd see them again, in his dreams, in his nightmares, for the rest of his life. The ship's medical bay was small. 2 beds. Basic equipment. The ship's medic, a Navy corpsman named Rodriguez, worked quickly, checking vitals, listening to lungs, shining lights in eyes. Marcus sat on one bed, Chen on the other, both of them wrapped in thermal blankets, both of them silent. Rodriguez kept asking questions. What happened down there? Did you hit something? Was there an equipment malfunction? Did you panic? Marcus didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because, how do you explain what they'd seen? How do you tell someone that 400 feet below the surface, in water that should have been empty, you saw people? Dead people. Drowned people. An army of them. Standing. Waiting. Singing. Chen wasn't talking either. He just stared at the wall. Eyes unfocused. Breathing shallow. In shock, probably. Or something worse than shock. Something that didn't have a medical name. The captain came down eventually. Captain Morrison. 50s. Career Navy. He'd seen a lot in his years at sea. But the look on his face when he saw Marcus and Chen suggested this was something new, something outside his experience. What happened out there? Morrison asked. His voice was calm, professional. But there was an edge to it. Concern. Or maybe fear. Marcus looked at him. Tried to find words. Tried to explain. We heard. Something. Saw something. Down there. What did you see? Marcus shook his head. I can't. Morrison turned to Chen. Son, I need you to tell me what happened. Chen didn't respond. Didn't even seem to hear. Just kept staring at that wall. Morrison looked at Rodriguez. How are they? Physically? Minor decompression sickness. Nothing life-threatening. But mentally. Rodriguez trailed off. Shook his head. They're in shock. Both of them. I've given them something to help them sleep. But they need to be monitored. And they need to be evaluated when we get back to port. Morrison nodded slowly. Then he looked at Marcus again. I'm ordering the dive operation suspended. We're pulling up anchor and heading back. Weather's getting worse anyway. We'll retrieve the equipment another time. Marcus felt a wave of relief. They were leaving. Getting away from that place. From whatever was down there. And Marcus, Morrison continued, I need you to write up a full report. Everything that happened. Everything you saw. No matter how unusual it might seem. Marcus nodded. Wondered what he would write. Wondered if anyone would believe him. Wondered if he even believed it himself. That night, lying in his bunk, Marcus couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those figures. Heard that song. The ship was moving now, putting distance between them and the Erminger Basin. But it didn't feel like enough. It felt like no amount of distance would ever be enough. He thought about his daughter. About Emily. About her collection of seashells and her bright smile and her innocent questions about what Daddy did at work. How do you go home to that? How do you sit at the dinner table and act normal when you've seen the impossible? 2 days later, Chen woke up screaming. Marcus heard it from his own bunk 3 rooms away. Heard the medics rushing. Heard Chen's voice, high and panicked, saying the same thing over and over. They're still singing. Can't you hear them? They're still singing. Rodriguez sedated him, kept him under for the rest of the voyage. When they finally reached port, Chen was transferred directly to a naval hospital. Marcus heard later that he spent 2 weeks there. 2 weeks of psychiatric evaluation. 2 weeks of doctors trying to understand what had happened to him down there. When Chen was finally released, he requested a transfer out of the dive program. Out of anything involving deep water. He became an instructor, teaching people to dive in swimming pools, in shallow, clear water where you could always see the bottom, where nothing could hide, where nothing could sing to you from the darkness. Marcus stayed in the program, finished his tour on the Intrepid, wrote his report, though he left out the most disturbing details. The figures, the singing, the sense that something down there had been calling to them, calling them to stay. He wrote about equipment malfunction, about acoustic phenomena, about psychological stress at depth. The official version. The version that made sense, but he requested reassignment. No more deep water. No more than 200 feet. His superiors approved it without question. Maybe they'd read something in his report. Maybe they'd talk to Chen. Maybe they just recognized the look in Marcus's eyes. The look of someone who'd seen something they couldn't unsee. Marcus dove for 6 more years. Shallow water only. Equipment maintenance on docks. Training exercises in controlled environments. Safe dives. Predictable dives. He was good at his job. Professional, reliable. But the passion was gone. The love he'd once had for being underwater. It had died in the Erminger Basin. died in that moment. When he looked down and saw those pale figures staring back. He retired in 1995, 38 years old. Too young to retire, really. But he'd served his time, done his duty. He'd earned it. He moved to Florida with Sarah and Emily. Got a job as a boat mechanic. Good, honest work. Keep your hands busy. Keep your mind occupied. Don't think about the deep. Don't think about the darkness. Don't think about the song. But the song never really left him. He'd hear it sometimes. In moments of quiet. In the space between sleeping and waking. A distant melody. Mournful. Ancient. Calling. Emily grew up. Went to college. Got married. Had kids of her own. She'd ask her father sometimes about his time in the Navy. About the diving. About the places he'd been. Marcus would tell her the safe stories. The funny ones. The ones about dolphins and colorful fish and sunken treasures. He never told her about the Erminger Basin, never told her about the voices. Some things children shouldn't know. Some things no one should know. Sarah died in 2008. Cancer. It came fast. 6 months from diagnosis to the end. Marcus held her hand in the hospital, watched her slip away, and in those final moments, she opened her eyes and looked at him and said, "Do you hear it? The singing?" Marcus felt his blood turn cold. "What?" "So beautiful," Sarah whispered. "They're calling me. Can't you hear them?" And then she was gone, just like that. And Marcus was left wondering if she'd really heard something. If the song he'd carried in his head for 19 years had somehow gotten into hers, or if it was just the morphine, just the brain shutting down, just coincidence. But he didn't believe in coincidence anymore. Not after the Erminger Basin. Not after seeing those figures in the deep. Marcus is 68 now, lives alone in a small house on the Florida coast. He can see the ocean from his porch. Sometimes he sits out there for hours, just watching the waves, listening, wondering what's out there, what's down there, in the places where light never reaches, in the trenches and valleys and endless dark spaces where the drowned gather, where they stand in silent rows, where they sing their eternal hymn. He tried to find information over the years, tried to research what he'd seen. He learned about the Erminger Basin, about its history, about the hundreds of ships that had gone down in those waters over the centuries, Viking longships, Spanish galleons, merchant vessels, warships, fishing boats. Every one of them taking souls down into the darkness. Thousands of people over thousands of years. All of them drowned. All of them lost to the sea, and he learned about the legends. The old stories that sailors had told for generations. About voices in the deep. About songs that lured men overboard. About the drowned dead who never rested, who stood vigil on the ocean floor, who waited, who called. The Norse had called them draugr, the drowned ones. They believed the ocean kept the souls of those who died at sea, kept them trapped in the water, kept them singing. The Irish had similar stories. The Selkies, the sirens, creatures that were neither living nor dead. That existed in the space between. That called to sailors, with beautiful, terrible songs. Every maritime culture had these stories. Japanese fishermen spoke of the funayure, the ghosts of those lost at sea. Pacific Islanders told of the tipua moana, the ocean spirits. Every culture, every coast. The same basic story told in different ways. The ocean keeps its dead. The ocean never lets go. Marcus found academic papers on underwater acoustics, on how sound behaves at depth, on temperature layers and pressure differentials and the way vibrations can travel through water for hundreds of miles. He found explanations for everything he'd heard. Scientific, rational, reasonable, but none of them explained what he'd seen. Those figures, those pale, standing forms. Human but not human. Dead but not dead. Real but impossible. He tried to contact Chen. Tracked him down through old Navy records. Found an address in California. Sent a letter. Got no response. Tried again 6 months later. Got a letter back from Chen's wife. Brief, polite, firmly requesting that Marcus not contact her husband again. That Chen was doing well. That he'd moved on. That he didn't need reminders of the past. Marcus understood. He didn't try again. Over the years, Marcus noticed something strange. He'd meet people sometimes. Former Navy divers, commercial deep-sea workers, submariners, and sometimes, in conversation, he'd mention deep water, mention the Atlantic, mention unexplained sounds. And he'd see something flicker in their eyes. Recognition. Or fear. Or both. Most wouldn't talk about it. Would change the subject. Would make excuses and leave. But a few, a very few, would lean in close, lower their voices, and tell him their stories. A Navy SEAL who'd done a dive off the coast of Norway. 300 feet down. Heard singing. Saw shadows moving in the darkness below. Surfaced immediately. Never dove that deep again. A commercial saturation diver who'd worked on an oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico. 500 feet down. Repairing a pipeline. Heard voices. Clear as day. Speaking in a language he didn't understand. Finished the job. Quit the next day. A marine biologist who'd gone down in a submersible to study deep-sea vents. 800 feet. Saw lights in the distance. Moving in formation. Like people carrying torches. But the lights were underwater. And nothing human could survive at that depth. Each story was different. But they all had the same core. The same essence. Something down there. Something in the deep. Something that looked human. Sounded human. But wasn't. Marcus collected these stories, wrote them down, kept them in a notebook in his desk. Evidence. Proof that he wasn't crazy. That Chen wasn't crazy. That what they'd seen was real. But he never shared them. Never published them. Never went public. Because who would believe him? What scientist would take seriously a retired Navy diver, claiming he'd seen ghosts on the ocean floor? What rational person would accept that the drowned dead stand in silent rows beneath the waves, singing their mournful song? And maybe that's what they wanted. The things in the deep. Maybe they didn't want to be known. Maybe they existed in that space between knowledge and myth. Between science and legend. A place where belief was optional. Where people could dismiss them as stories, as folklore, as the fevered imaginings of men who'd gone too deep, stayed too long, seen too much. Last year, Marcus had a visitor, a young woman, mid-20s. She introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Chen, David Chen's daughter. She'd grown up hearing whispers about her father's last deep-water dive, about the incident that changed him, about the man named Marcus Webb who'd been there with him. She wanted to know what happened. Her father had died 6 months earlier. Heart attack. In his final days, he'd been agitated, talking about the water, about voices, about needing to go back. Her mother had thought it was dementia. Confusion. But Sarah had done her research, had found the incident reports, had tracked down Marcus. They sat on his porch, looked out at the ocean, and Marcus told her everything. Every detail. Every impossible thing he and her father had experienced in the Erminger Basin 33 years earlier. Sarah listened without interrupting, took notes, asked careful, thoughtful questions. When Marcus finished, Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I believe you." Marcus felt something release in his chest. Relief. Validation. After all these years, someone believed him. "I've been researching deep ocean phenomena for my doctoral thesis," Sarah continued. "There's more going on down there than most people realize. Strange sounds recorded by underwater listening stations. Unexplained sonar readings, witness accounts from submersible pilots and deep-sea researchers. Most of it gets dismissed, classified as equipment malfunction or acoustic anomalies. But the patterns are there, if you know what to look for." "What do you think it is?" Marcus asked. "What did we see?" Sarah shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe the legends are right. Maybe the ocean really does keep its dead. Maybe consciousness persists in some form we don't understand. Or maybe it's something else entirely. Something we don't have the language or the science to explain yet. Your father never talked about it? Not directly. But sometimes I'd catch him staring at the ocean. And he'd have this look. Like he was listening to something. Something far away. And once, when I was little, I asked him what he was listening to, and he said. Sarah paused. Swallowed. He said he was listening to the drowned people sing. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. I'm sorry. I should have stayed with him. Should have helped him through it. You saved his life, Sarah said firmly. You got him to the surface. Gave him 33 more years. 33 years to see me grow up. To meet his grandchildren. That's not nothing. Marcus nodded. Couldn't speak. Sarah stood to leave. Handed Marcus a card with her contact information. If you ever want to talk more about this, or if you remember anything else, please call me. I'm working on a paper. Collecting accounts. Trying to find patterns. Trying to understand. Will you publish it? Marcus asked. Maybe. Probably not in a mainstream journal. They wouldn't take it seriously. But there are others like us. People who've experienced things they can't explain. People who are looking for answers. Or at least looking for confirmation that they're not crazy. After she left, Marcus sat on that porch for hours. Watching the sun set over the ocean. Watching the water turn from blue to gold to dark. And he thought about all those people down there. All those drowned souls standing in neat rows on the ocean floor. Still waiting, still watching, still singing. He wondered what they wanted. If they wanted anything, maybe they were just there, existing, trapped between life and death, between the world above and the world below. Maybe they didn't want anything except to be remembered, to be acknowledged, to have someone know they were still there. Or maybe they wanted company. Maybe they were calling to the living to come join them, to sink down through the darkness and take their place in those endless rows, to add their voices to that eternal choir. Marcus doesn't know, probably never will know. But he thinks about them. Every day. Every night. When he lies in bed and closes his eyes and hears that distant melody, that song that's been in his head for 34 years. That song that will be in his head until the day he dies. And sometimes, when he's feeling particularly morbid, he wonders what will happen when he does die. Wonders if his soul will sink down through the water. Down to the Erminger Basin, down to where those pale figures stand. Wonders if he'll take his place among them, if he'll stand there in the darkness, if he'll open his mouth and add his voice to their song. Part of him hopes not. Hopes that death is just nothing. Blackness. Peace. An end. But another part of him, a small, quiet part that he doesn't like to acknowledge, another part of him wants to know, wants to understand, wants to finally hear the whole song instead of just fragments, wants to see what they see, know what they know, because the thing about the deep is, it's not empty. It never was. There are things down there. Living things. Dead things. Things that might be neither or both, and they're waiting, always waiting. In the places where light doesn't reach, where pressure would crush a human body, where the water is so cold it would stop your heart in seconds. They're down there, standing, watching, singing, and if you go deep enough, if you listen carefully enough, you'll hear them too. 3 weeks ago, Marcus had a heart attack. Minor. Not life-threatening. He spent 2 nights in the hospital and came home with medications and stern warnings from his doctor about diet and exercise and stress. Emily came to stay with him for a few days. Fusses over him like he's fragile, makes him healthy meals, monitors his blood pressure. Marcus lets her. It's easier than arguing. On her last night before going home, they sit on the porch together, watching the ocean. Emily is telling him about her kids, about her job, about normal, everyday things, and Marcus is half listening, half somewhere else. Dad, Emily says suddenly. Are you okay? Marcus blinks. Comes back to the present. Yeah. Sorry. Just thinking. About Mom? About a lot of things. Emily is quiet for a moment. Then she says, Can I ask you something? Something you probably won't want to talk about? Marcus looks at her. His daughter. All grown up. 40 years old now. When did that happen? You can ask me anything. When I was a kid. Maybe 8 or 9. I had this dream. This nightmare. Really. I was underwater. Deep underwater. And there were all these people around me. Standing in rows. And they were singing. And I was so scared, I woke up crying. And I came to your room, and you were already awake. Sitting up in bed. And you were crying too. Marcus remembers. God. He remembers. I asked you what was wrong, Emily continues. And you said you'd had the same dream. The same exact dream. People underwater. Singing. You told me it was just a coincidence. That dreams were weird like that. But Dad, was it really a coincidence? Marcus doesn't answer right away. He's thinking about that night. About waking up with the song in his head. About seeing his daughter in his doorway, tears on her cheeks, describing the exact same thing he'd just seen in his dreams. He'd told himself it was coincidence. Had to be. Because the alternative was that somehow, the song had gotten into his daughter's head too, had crossed over from his nightmares into hers. I don't know, he finally says. Honestly, I don't know. What did you see? Down there? In the ocean? What changed you? Marcus looks at his daughter, wonders how much to tell her, wonders if the truth will help or hurt, decides she's old enough, decides she deserves to know. So he tells her. Everything. The whole story. The Erminger Basin. The voices. The figures standing in rows. The song that never ends. Chen's descent into trauma. The years of nightmares. The other divers with similar experiences. The legends and the science and the terrible suspicion that the ocean really does keep its dead. Emily listens. Doesn't interrupt. Doesn't judge. Every day. Does it scare you? Marcus thinks about this. Not anymore. Not like it used to. Now it's just there. Part of me. Like tinnitus. A constant ringing that you learn to live with. Do you think they're really there? The drowned people? I know what I saw. But do you think they're really there? Or do you think maybe it was something else? Some kind of hallucination. Some psychological effect of being at that depth. Marcus shakes his head. Chen saw them too. We both saw the same thing. And I've talked to others. Other divers. Other people who've been down there. They've all seen something, heard something. Not all the same, but similar enough. Emily nods slowly, looks out at the ocean. The sun has set completely now. The water is dark, rippling with moonlight. It's beautiful, she says. The ocean. Even knowing what you've told me, it's still beautiful. Yeah, Marcus agrees. It is. Are you afraid of dying? Of going there? Marcus considers this. He's thought about it a lot lately, especially since the heart attack, especially since realizing that his time is running out, that one day, sooner or later, his heart will stop, his lungs will cease, his body will fail. And then what? What happens to the soul of a man who's seen the drowned dead? Who's heard their song? Who's been called by them? I don't know, he says honestly. I guess I'll find out. Emily reaches over and takes his hand, squeezes it. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. They sit like that for a while. Father and daughter, hand in hand, looking out at the dark water. And Marcus thinks he hears it. That familiar melody. That distant chorus. Rising up from the deep. Calling him home, but not yet. Not tonight. Tonight he's still here. Still breathing. Still alive. Still holding his daughter's hand, Tonight, the ocean can wait.